Hello, dear friends. This is Grandma Jeannie. Welcome back to my workshop. You might recall a week or so ago, I bought a couple of doll houses, and one of them was this little midget manor. Now, I already have a midget manor. Looks like this, but the one that I got recently was missing the base, and this is the base off of the one that I already had. So I have already photographed this base so I could make a copy of it, and then I can make like a replacement base for this little house that I got recently. Before I do any other work to this house, first I want to tell you what needs to be done. I got to make that replacement base. I need to straighten it. There's a little bit of bend right in here, and I'll be getting my hammer out to straighten that out a little bit. There might be, let's see, yes, this wall has got a little bend in it too. And the roof, I think, had a little bit of a bend or a crease, maybe too. Yeah, right there in the corner. So we're going to straighten all that out. Then we're going to clean it, and then I'm going to do a little bit of paint touch-up. This is not in bad shape, but it's got a few spots where the paint is missing, and a little bit of like corrosion over here. So I want to make this little house as cute as I can. I've already taken it apart, and in case you've never seen one apart, this wall is the same as this wall in here, and these are just two pieces, and they just crisscross each other. So we've got the in-between wall, and then this is the floor, and then there's slots in there where that slides together. There, it slides together like that, and that forms those 4 rooms. So I did not know exactly how that was constructed, but now I know. And then this wall fits inside the frame. There's some little tabs that hold it into place in there. So let's get it cleaned and get it straightened. To clean it, I use a non-sudsy cleaner, and this says Spray 9, which is a good cleaner. However, when this bottle was empty, I filled it up with Awesome Cleaner from the Dollar Tree, just because that's what I had on hand. And I like the spray bottle better than I like the ones from Awesome Cleaner. So Awesome Cleaner works good, Spray 9 Cleaner, or even 409 Cleaner, anything that's non-sudsy. I spray right on my paper towel. I never spray in my houses because there's little rolled edges here in the metal, and I want to avoid getting metal moisture in there. I don't want it to like have even a chance of getting rusty. So this house is older. It is, I don't think it's real dirty, but we're going to do every surface because you never know. It could have nicotine on it or anything on it. I don't know. I've already actually washed this floor once, but I'm going to give it a quick wash again. Just takes a minute because it's such a little house. This is the smallest of the metal houses from this time period. Here's my disclaimer on cleaning. Always do a test spot on the bottom. This is the bottom of the roof or the bottom of the base before you use any cleaner on your house. Use a test spot. Make sure you're not removing the paint, and make sure you're not making the paint tacky, because you don't want to make your little house in worse condition than it already is. Also, don't rub too hard. Don't rub too much. Don't use too much liquid. It's time to straighten this little house out. Let me go through the basics. I use a piece of hardwood floor. This is just a scrap from when we did our living room. If you don't have that, you could use another small piece of wood or a 2x4, or maybe even a book that you don't mind getting dented. But I like to have something flat and firm to use. And the hammer I use is a hard rubber hammer. This looks like metal, but it's hard rubber. If you don't have a hard rubber hammer, you could use a metal hammer. I would maybe cover the head of that up with like a sock so you're not striking metal against metal. So in this case, I'm going to start at the roof, and this corner here is bent up. It's got a dent right in here. So I'm going to lay that down and just hammer right on that dent and see if I can get that flat. That's a lot better than it was. I start out and I hammer gentle, and then I hammer a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. And then I take a look at it, and if it's not as flat as I like, I try again. So this is not perfect, but it is quite a bit flatter than it was. It was even a little bit warped in the middle, and look now how nice and flat that is. Okay, same thing for this little piece here. This is the inside wall. I'm pretty happy with that piece too. It's a lot better. We've got one more that needs straightened, and that is, let's see, this outside wall is bent out here. So I'm going to lay it down and probably hammer right here where it's kind of bowed up. And then that should help get that back into shape. That looks good. It's a lot straighter than it was. I went ahead and did this other side just a little bit also. All right, we're ready to start painting. I think that before I do, I'm going to do just a little bit of sanding here. Now, the reason I sand is if I touch that, it's not just rough to the touch, but that corroded area is thicker than the surrounding areas. It's kind of raised up. So I'm going to sand that down just to make that a little bit flatter. Maybe right in there. There and there. When I do, I'll use a little tiny piece of a sandpaper and just use the end of my fingertip and just rub there, because you can and will sand those graphics off. And I don't want to damage any more of the graphics than I need to. I use a fine grit sandpaper. This is 220. The bigger the number, the finer the grit. So I use 220 or higher number. I just tear off a little piece, and I'll just get a new little piece torn off of here, just enough to cover the end of my finger. And then I'll do some gentle circle motion with the very end of my finger and get that sanded down so that it's flat. Then I'll give it another quick wipe off, because you tend to get a little bit of dust from that. I'll do a quick wipe off again after I sand it. Tonight we paint. Of all the things I get to do here in my workshop, I think painting these little doll houses is maybe my very favorite. And tonight we're going to get to do that. I have got some basic colors out here. I've got blue, red, yellow, white, off-white, brown. I'll probably use all those, a mixture of those at any rate. I also have out my paint palette. Now this was a cutting board, and I've covered it with wax paper so that after a while I can pull that off and throw it away. I'll use the front and the back. Then I'll throw that away and cover it again, and it saves me having to wash that. Here's my little parts I'm going to paint. I've got over here a cup of water and a couple of brushes in there, and a paper towel I can use to dab my brush off. So to mix these colors, I just give it a try first of all. Give it my best guess on how I'm going to try to match those. And then if it's not a good match, then I just adjust it on my cutting board here and I try again. Now this is acrylic paint, so I can wash it off. It's not permanent. It will dry. It will be durable enough to handle a normal play, especially with a collector, but it's not permanent. I can wipe it off if I don't like it. I'm going to do the white part first. And on dollhouses, I call that dollhouse white, because it's usually not a bright white, it's an off-white. So I'm going to use this off-white or antique white, and I may even add a little brown to it. I have found that adding a little brown to a lot of these colors works very, very well on these vintage dollhouses. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of the antique white with a little bit of brown, and then we're going to test it on here and see if it's a good match. This is the inside part, the ceiling of the roof. You really cannot tell if this is a good match until the paint dries, because it dries just a little bit darker than it goes on. It had been a little bit light, so I added some brown, and I actually put just a little bit of green in there. And now it's probably still too light, but it's going to take more than one coat. So I'll do the first coat this way, and then if it needs to be a little darker, I'll do the second coat and make it just a little bit darker. The other thing is, since this is the ceiling and it's not in view a lot, I may actually end up painting just this whole thing, and then I know it would absolutely match because it'll all be repainted one color. We'll see. I'm going to work on matching this a little bit better, and then if I feel like it'd be easier to paint the whole thing, I will. I added a little more green and a little more brown to that, and that is a pretty close color match. So it's going to take a couple of coats and then see how it dries, but I think we might be on the right track color-wise. This is coming along. While I'm waiting for that to dry to do another coat, I'm going to try that same color everywhere here that needed a little bit of that off-white. For instance, right here at the very base of this floor, you might recall that's that spot that I sanded a little bit. We're just going to dot a little bit of that on there, thinking that's probably the same faded color that is on the inside of that ceiling. So I'm going to go through this house, and everywhere that needs that little bit of off-white, in this case I always call that dollhouse white. Dollhouse white varies from house to house, depending on how faded it is. I'm going to hit all those light colored spots. This is looking pretty good. Be sure to do these areas that show when you look at the house to display it or play with it. This area along here was worn. this edge and along here too. So I did a coat of that Dollhouse white on that edge to freshen that up. Okay, I've got the inside done as far as the white. We're going to work on yellow next. Now this is the upstairs floor and it's got quite a little bit of paint missing. So again, I'm going to try to match that. But before I do that, I'm going to do this wall in the kitchen because it's a little bit lighter yellow and it's got a few little spots on it. So I'm going to try to match that very pale yellow. And again, if I have trouble, since that's a small area, I may consider filling all that in, but we'll see. I've got my off-white here on my palette, a new pile of off-white, and then a pile of bright yellow. Let's see if that off-white just happens to be close enough, or does it have to have a little yellow in it? I feel like it's going to have a little yellow, but let's just see. Yep, a little yellow and probably a little brown. You probably can't see that, but that's pretty light on there. Now, some of those spots, sometimes I'll just touch them with my paint and then touch it with my finger. But let's get a little bit of better color match and then try that on some of these real light spots. Very light brown, very light spots where there's just a little bit of paint gone. Okay, I added a little brown to that, and then I added a little brown again because it's a little bit of a darker color than you kind of think it is. And now I'm doing that where I'm touching it with my paintbrush and then touching it with my thumb or my finger to smudge most of that paint off. And I think that is going to work very well. This is the upstairs floor, and this is the part that you will see. And you can see there's quite a little bit of paint missing. This will be the ceiling to the downstairs, so that's not quite as critical. It's got a little bit of paint gone, so we will touch it up. But let's see if we can make this look good. Now, I think we're going to have some more yellow. And here's the spot I used for the kitchen wall. It was a pale yellow, and I put a little brown in there. So we're going to have more paint, so let's put some white in there. And then we're going to put, more yellow in there because it's got to be darker. And then we're going to need, here's our brown pile over here. Let's get, a good little bit of brown and put in there. See how we can get that color to match. Let's see how close that color match is. It's a little light. I'm going to wipe it off my finger, put a little more yellow and a little more brown and try again. I've given this a couple of coats and it's getting there. It's pretty close, but I'm going to have to do another coat. You can see a little metal coming through, but I'm out of paint on my palette of that color. But here is a helpful hint for you. Here's the little pile I was using right here. So rather than trying to match onto my piece, what I'll do is I'll put enough color in here and then I'll try to match to the edge of that pile. See if I can match that same color again to get very close to where I was. I'm going to have to nab some more yellow to do that. But that's what I'll do is try to match my new pile here to the edge over here. And that way I'll know I'm very close. I think this is going very well. I've done another coat and I'm going to let it dry and then we're going to check it out. I've got just a little bit of green left to do. Along here there's some green missing. And then in this room, I believe that's the living room, there's a little bit of green missing right there. I feel like if I use this green and a little bit of brown, I think I'm going to get there close. And I've already put some of that green here on my palette, and here's my brown pile. Let's just try, I like to tap it off, put it in the brown, tap it off, and then bring it down here, mix it in and see where we are. And do we need a little more, or is that enough? Maybe a little more, because we like our brown. Okay, let's see how it looks. I'm going to try it here on this wall. There's a couple spots on this wall that need touched up. Not too bad. It needs, I think, a little more brown. I feel like there's just a few little spots here on the roof that could use just a little bit of red paint. So I'm going to do that same thing where I'm going to put some red on my palette and then drop a little bit of brown in it just to back it down a little bit and see how that works. Oh my gosh, dear friends, that was so much fun. I think everything's been touched up. Again, I'm going to let this dry overnight and take one more look at it, give it a second coat or a color correction anywhere that it needs it. I still have to fabricate that base, and then this little house is going to be done. This little house should have little bitty tabs on the bottom. This is the one I have that was in good condition, and see those little bitty tabs? I'm going to see if I can get my finger there so you can just see how small those tabs are that hook the house to the base. On my house that I'm working on, those tabs were gone, but I do want something to be able to hook that down tight. So I have made some tabs that are a little bit bigger. It'll be easier for me to work with. And since I'm fabricating the base, those bigger tabs will go down into my newly fabricated base. So I made them a little bigger. Now, I cut those out of the can, like the lid of a can, and they were metal colored. And so I have put a bit of my Dollhouse white on those to make them blend in. So this one's got white up on the top. The bottom part will be poked into the base. Same with the other side. I glued those on there with JB Weld, which is a 2-part epoxy glue. And then I used these clips and clipped them on there to hold tight overnight. And then today they are nice and tight and firm on there. Now that JB Weld, I like to do a little experimenting. So you can see I mixed it here onto my paint palette. And right here where I mixed it, it's set up really hard. But the first dot I put on there, it comes out, like in 2 sides of the tube. And one side was a bigger blob than the other, so I didn't want to use it. So over here where I didn't mix it, see, that has stayed soft. On this other side where I mixed it properly, it came out nice and hard, just like it should. I'm just going to cover this up with paper so I don't get stuff on everything. And then again, when I get done with this, I can rip all this off and throw it away, this wax paper. I have a printout of that floor. Now this was taken from a photograph I made of the other floor that I had, and I printed it out on regular typing paper, printing paper. And I've also got that in miniature. I made a little one on purpose so I could do this test. The other thing I've got here is the roof to that building, and I ended up painting the whole inside of that roof. There's the shingle side, and I've painted the whole inside with that Dollhouse white color, that off-white. On this side, you can see I put tape over those little holes that hold the roof in place, because I'm going to spray some clear coat on this side and just see how it comes out. And I don't want that clear coat to leak over to the other side. So here's my product. I've had Dollhouse friends that have used this and good success, but I never have. So it's an experiment for me. If I like how it turns out on my little sample, I'm going to paint that whole bigger floor with the same clear coat. I am happy with how that little sample turned out. It didn't make the paper warp or anything, and it added a nice little shine to that. So I'm going to do the bigger one now. All right, we're on our last piece of this. Here's my original floor from my other house, and I have traced this onto a piece of lightweight metal. This is roof flashing, so it's not very heavy. It is metal, and I can cut it with a pair of like scissors, like maybe kitchen scissors like this will cut it pretty easily. I'm also going to cut 2 of the same thing out of this cracker box, so it will be sandwiched. That will make it a little stiffer, plus it will help protect it from any sharp edges. My disclaimer, this is sharp, don't get cut. It's a good idea to wear protective eye gear because you could get a little piece of metal that would fly off, and also dispose of your scraps safely so they don't get on the floor and poke anybody in the foot. I had to get a bigger cracker box. I had to go to my recycle. That one I had wasn't quite big enough to cover that piece of metal. Now we're going to glue these 3 pieces together just to make a sandwich, and then our floor will be a good weight, a good depth, and a good strength. This is the glue I like to use. Now I got this, I took a picture of this actual floor that I had, and then I put it on a Word document and I made it the right size. And then I added a little bit of extra color around the edges so that I can wrap this down around the sides, and then it would still cover the sides up, just like, see, actually on this one, that actually has got that print on the sides. And then I sprayed it with some that shiny stuff, so it's got a little bit of shine to it. But when I printed this, I accidentally did a black and white one too, which is kind of good because I'm going to use this for a pattern to make sure that it all fits good. Plus, it's going to be key that when I put this little house on here, that the little tabs that I made line up correctly into the holes I'm going to have to make in this base. And so those holes have to be right there. And then there's got to be one right over here because I added those little tabs. So they've got it. That's key to have that in the right place. So I'm going to put this on here, tape it on the back, and use it for a template as to where those holes have to be. The challenge is that now that we have metal in here, remember there's 2 layers of cardboard and a layer of metal, I'm going to have to take a nail and probably punch into there to get those holes because I can't use my scissors to do that. So after I had my little row of holes punched, I took my steak knife and put it up there and hammered it until I got actually a slit. Because remember, there's metal in there, and I know there's a slit there because look, I can get the tip of my knife through there. This knife isn't super sharp and it's pretty sturdy, so I was successful at doing that. All right, I've got to get this other one finished up too. I'm not going to lie. This is what I said to myself. Is this actually going to work? Well, you know what? It did actually work. I think it's going to work very well. I just have to put that color copy on here and then attach that on there and put it back together. I'm going to leave a nice, pretty wide white border. I think I'm going to have to put something like on the bottom of this, so if you lift it up, it looks fine under there, and it doesn't look like it's been, like hodgepodge together, although it kind of has. So, but I want to leave a nice wide border. I don't know. Maybe if I left that whole wide border there. Let's fold it up and just see how it works just like this. Well, I think I lucked into that good idea because I left all that white paper on there, and look, there's enough to cover that whole back. I need to trim it just a little tiny bit, and then the back will be like finished also, and the top looks really good. And look at, considering it's just, a paper copy, looks really good, don't you think? This is the original made out of metal, and then this is the one that I made out of paper, put a little bit of clear coat so it's got a little bit of shine. Pretty pleased with it. Okay, I've got it lined up pretty good, and I've got those holes poked in, and there's those metal tabs I made. There's one there, one there. I'm going to go ahead and fold those down now, and that way that will secure that to the base. And then we're going to wrap this paper down and put some glue in there so that bottom will be nice and tidy, and those tabs will not even show. They'll be invisible. There, it's attached nicely to its new base. We just fold these down and glue them. Yay, then we'll put the walls in and the roof on. There are some little tabs to hook those into the side. There's also a little tab here in the bottom. So I'm going to take when I know where the right spot is, I'll take my steak knife and poke a hole so that will be kind of anchored there in the bottom too. All right, dear friends, it's done. I'm telling you, this was a labor of love. It took a little more time and effort than I thought, but it came out really nice. Now, this is my original that I used for a pattern, and then this is the one that I updated the paint and did that replacement bottom made out of, it does have metal in it, and then it's got cardboard. Isn't that just adorable and precious? All the paint is touched up. Look all the way around. It looks really, really nice. I love it, and I am proud of it. And it took a little more effort than I thought it would, but it came out really nice. The other thing I did is I photographed all the walls, so if anybody is missing the base or missing anything in their little house, I could help them with a replacement for that. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm glad to have this one done. I've got another house ready to come on my bench, so I'll be working on it soon. And always remember, Grandma Jeannie loves you.